never meant to get involved with him. Not a man like that. Not someone whose name could empty a room faster than a gunshot. But the truth is, everything started with a mistake. A small one. The kind you make when you're tired, overworked, and trying to do the right thing. And that mistake changed my life. I was standing in line at the diner that morning, waiting for my takeout coffee before heading to the hospital. It was one of those mornings when the air feels thick with exhaustion. My daughter Emma had been up all night with a fever, and I was running on fumes. I remember fumbling through my purse, counting out crumpled bills, when the old cashier sighed and said, "The man ahead of you forgot to pay." He'd already left. Some guy in a black shirt, tall, calm, unreadable. I didn't even think. I just paid his bill, $23 and some change, and left. I never saw his face that morning. I didn't know his name. I didn't know that $23 would bring a man like him into my world. By nightfall, I'd forgotten all about it. My focus was on Emma, her flushed cheeks, her trembling hands as she slept beside me. I was calculating how to stretch my paycheck to cover rent and medicine. I was surviving. Then, 2 days later, a black car stopped outside my apartment. Windows tinted. Engine humming low. I froze. You know that sound your heart makes when it hits the wall of your ribs too hard? That's what I heard in my chest. A man in a suit stepped out. Not the driver. Someone else. His presence felt expensive. He looked at me, then down at the envelope in his hand. "Miss Carter?" "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. He handed me the envelope. "From Mr. Moretti, he asked me to thank you." I frowned. "Who?" He didn't answer. He just got back into the car and left. Inside the envelope were 10 crisp $1,000 bills and a note. "You shouldn't pay strangers' debts. But if you do, make sure they're worth it. VM." That was the moment everything cracked open. I spent that night sitting on the kitchen floor, the envelope in my lap, the money spread out like an accusation. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? That someone sent me $10,000 for paying their breakfast bill? No one would believe me. And the name on the note, Moretti, buzzed in my head like a curse I'd heard before but couldn't place. The next morning, I left the money untouched on the counter and went to work. But all day, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me. The same black car passed the hospital parking lot twice. When I walked out after my shift, it was parked across the street. I walked faster, clutching my purse, my phone. I told myself I was imagining things. I wasn't. He found me that night. I was unlocking my apartment door when I heard a deep voice behind me. Calm, controlled. "You should have kept the money, Clara." I turned, and there he was. The man from the diner, the one I never saw clearly until that moment. Black shirt, top button undone, sleeves rolled just enough to show veins and scars. His face was striking, sharp but not cruel, eyes dark enough to drown in. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled faintly like the question bored him. "Someone who owes you $23. And a warning." "A warning?" He stepped closer. "Don't ever interfere in things you don't understand. Even small things, especially small things." I should have run. I should have slammed the door, called someone, anyone. But something in his tone, steady, cold, yet protective, rooted me in place. "I didn't know who you were," I whispered. "I know," he said. "That's why you're still breathing." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The hallway light flickered. His gaze dropped to the envelope I was still clutching. "You didn't spend it," he said. "No, I don't want it." "Then I'll take it back." I handed it to him, but his fingers brushed mine as he did, and something electric moved between us. Sharp, unwelcome. His expression shifted. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Do you live alone?" he asked. "With my daughter," I said before thinking. His eyes hardened. "How old?" 7. He went quiet, jaw tight. "Lock your doors tonight, Clara. And if anyone asks about me, you didn't see me. You don't know my name. Understand?" I nodded. He turned to leave but stopped halfway down the stairs. Without looking back, he said, "You have a good heart. Don't let it get you killed." Then he disappeared into the dark. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment felt like a threat. Emma stirred beside me, her tiny hand reaching for mine. I whispered, "It's okay, baby." "Mommy's here," though I didn't believe it, because somewhere outside, a man named Moretti knew my name, my face, where I lived, and I didn't know if that made me safe or marked. 3 days later, the first warning came. A rock through the window. No note, just silence. Then the calls started. Unknown numbers, voices that didn't speak. I called the police once. They filed a report but did nothing. I changed my route to work, changed Emma's school schedule, but the car kept showing up. Finally, I snapped. I found the courage, or the stupidity, to call the number written faintly on the back of the envelope he'd left. It wasn't in the note, but on the fold, small, almost hidden. I dialed it. He answered on the first ring. "You weren't supposed to call this number," he said. "I need you to make it stop," I said. There was silence. "Then tell me what happened." I told him everything, the window, the calls, the car. My voice shook, but I didn't care. I was desperate. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Pack a bag for you and your daughter. I'll send someone. I'm not leaving my home for— It's not a request, Clara." And then the line went dead. 2 hours later, headlights flashed outside. A different car this time. Black but sleeker, quieter. I hesitated, holding Emma's hand, her backpack already slung over her shoulder. She was half asleep, confused. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "Somewhere safe," I whispered, praying I was telling the truth. A woman in a black suit stepped out. "Mr. Moretti sent me." That was the moment I realized I had no control left. The drive was long, silent. City lights gave way to trees, then gates. When the car finally stopped, we were in front of a house so large it felt like another world. Security lights cast the walls in silver. The woman opened my door. "He's waiting inside." I carried Emma in my arms, her head on my shoulder, and walked through the doors. The place smelled like cedar and smoke, and there he was, leaning against the railing of a grand staircase, black shirt again, sleeves rolled, watching me like I was the first thing in a long time that surprised him. "You shouldn't have called," he said. "I didn't know what else to do," I replied. He studied me. "You did the right thing, but from this point on you listened to me." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Because whoever's after you thinks you're connected to me now. And in my world, that means you're under my protection." "I don't want to be connected to you," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "It's too late for that." He turned away, giving orders to the woman beside him. Something about surveillance, safe rooms, men on rotation. The words blurred together. I stood there holding Emma, feeling my knees shake. When he finally looked back at me, his eyes softened. "You'll stay here until I say otherwise. And if I say no," he tilted his head, "then I can't keep you alive." That night, I put Emma to bed in a guest room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window. Beyond it, the forest was silent. Somewhere below, men with guns patrolled the property. I should have been terrified. I was. But underneath the fear, something else pulsed. An inexplicable pull toward the man downstairs, the stranger whose bill I paid, whose world I'd stumbled into by accident. When I finally went downstairs, he was in the study, pouring a drink. He looked up when I entered, his eyes dark and calm. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," I whispered. "Tell me the truth." "What are you?" He smirked, took a sip, then said quietly, "The man everyone owes something to, including you." My breath caught. "I don't owe you anything." He walked toward me, stopping close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin. "You will." I didn't understand then what he meant, but I remember how his eyes softened as he looked at me. Not with cruelty, not even possession, something deeper. Like he recognized me before I recognized him. And that was the night I stopped being just a woman trying to survive. That was the night I became something else, someone tied to a man whose danger felt like destiny. He said he'd protect me, but what he didn't say was that protection always comes with a price, and I was about to find out exactly how high mine was. I learned quickly that safety under Vincent Moretti came with rules. No phone calls without permission, no walks outside the gates, no questions about what happened beyond the walls. The mansion was beautiful, but beauty can be a kind of cage. Every sound echoed too clearly. Every silence felt watched. Emma adjusted faster than I did. She found a swing in the back garden, and every morning she'd run to it, her laughter slicing through the air like a sound that didn't belong in this place. Sometimes I'd catch one of the guards pretending not to smile as she played. But whenever I looked toward the house, Vincent was always watching from one of the upper balconies. Black shirt, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. Days turned into weeks. I told myself this was temporary, that he'd fix whatever danger followed me and let us go. But with each day that passed, the lines blurred between captivity and care. The first real conversation we had after moving in happened one night in the kitchen. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs for tea. He was already there, sitting at the counter, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. "You don't sleep much, do you?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, eyes heavy with thought. "Sleep is for people who don't owe the world anything." "And you owe it everything?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "Everything. And everyone. Who are you, really?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "The men who threw that rock at your window, they weren't after you. They were sending me a message." My stomach dropped. "So I'm bait. You were collateral. Now you're leverage." His voice was so calm it almost didn't register as a threat. "So you brought me here to keep me alive?" I asked. "I brought you here because if anything happened to you or your daughter, it would be another war I don't have time for." "Another war," I repeated. "You say that like it's normal." He met my gaze. "In my world, it is." He said it like a confession, not an excuse. And maybe that's why I didn't walk away. There was something in his voice. Fatigue, honesty, something human. I didn't want to believe he was a monster. I wanted to believe he was a man who'd forgotten how to be one. Days became quieter after that. I started cooking again, mostly because Emma refused to eat the meals the private chef made. One afternoon, Vincent came into the kitchen while I was making soup. "You cook?" he asked, leaning against the counter. I didn't look up. "Somebody has to feed my kid," he smirked. "You don't trust my chef?" "I don't trust anyone whose food doesn't taste like it's been worried over." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I used to have someone who cooked like that." "My mother." I froze. The words slipped out of him like he hadn't planned to say them. "What happened to her?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "She died when I was 16. My father wasn't kind." The silence between us thickened. I looked at him then. Not the man the city feared, but the boy who lost everything too soon. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He nodded once, his jaw tight. I stopped being sorry a long time ago. That night I dreamed of him. Not the way I wanted to. It wasn't romantic. It was haunted. His hands stained with something I couldn't name. His eyes searching for something he'd already lost. I woke up shaken, sitting in the dark, wondering how a man like him could feel more like a secret than a threat. Then everything changed. One afternoon, I came downstairs and found 2 men in suits waiting near the door. Vincent was there, his voice low and dangerous. "You touch them, you die. Simple." The men left fast, their fear trailing behind them. When I asked what that was about, he said nothing. But that night, I heard him on the phone through the walls. "She's not part of this, Marco. You lay one hand on her and I'll burn down everything you own." His tone was ice. I realized then that whoever Marco was, he was the reason we were still trapped. The next morning, I asked him directly, "Who's Marco?" He stared at me for a long time. "You really want to know?" "Yes," he exhaled. "My cousin. Used to be my brother in everything but blood, until he decided to sell information about me to the people who killed my mother." I froze. "So he's the one after you. He's the one who thinks I owe him something, and I got caught in the middle." He nodded. "Because you paid for my breakfast." It almost sounded absurd when he said it. Almost. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If Marco believes you mean something to me, he'll come for you. So until this is over, you don't leave my sight." That was the first time his protectiveness crossed into something else. He followed through, always near, always watching. It should have scared me, but the more time I spent with him, the more I understood the layers underneath that armor. He never touched me, never crossed a line. But every word he spoke felt like it carried something unsaid. One night I found him in his office, staring at an old photograph. 2 boys, maybe 15, arms around each other. One of them was Vincent, the other, Marco. He didn't hear me at first. When he finally looked up, I saw something break behind his eyes. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. I wasn't trying to pry. Everyone who says that always ends up seeing too much. He put the photo face down on the desk. Why didn't you kill him? I asked before I could stop myself. His jaw clenched. Because once upon a time he saved my life. Twice. And now you're saving mine, I said softly. He looked at me, long enough to make my pulse race. Don't mistake protection for mercy. Maybe I already have. He stepped toward me, slow, deliberate, until we were inches apart. I could feel his breath against my cheek. You don't know what you're doing, he whispered. Maybe I do. Something in his expression cracked. He looked at me like he wanted to say 1,000 things and none at all. Then he stepped back, fists tight. Go to bed, Clara, he said, before you make me forget what kind of man I am. That was the night I knew it wasn't one-sided. That he wanted me too, but wanting him was like wanting fire. You can warm your hands for a moment, but sooner or later it burns. The next week, danger found us again. I was in the garden with Emma when the sound of gunfire split the air. Guards shouted. Vincent appeared from nowhere, grabbed us both, pulled us to the ground. His body covered mine as bullets tore through the hedges. I could hear Emma crying, screaming for me. When it stopped, he didn't move right away. His hand was pressed against my back, breath ragged. Are you hurt? He demanded. No, Emma, she's fine, he said, voice raw. You're fine. But when I pulled back, I saw blood seeping through his sleeve. You're shot. It's nothing. Vincent. He caught my wrist, his eyes blazing. Do not say my name like that. Not when I'm trying to remember why I shouldn't kiss you. My heart slammed in my chest. For a moment, the world narrowed to his eyes, his breath, his pain. Then the guards came and he let go. He refused medical help until Emma was asleep. I found him later in his study, shirt half unbuttoned, cleaning the wound himself. You need a doctor, I said. I need this to be over. Let me help. He looked up at me, then nodded once. I cleaned the wound, my hands shaking. He didn't flinch. The silence between us felt heavier than words. Why do you keep doing this? I whispered. Doing what? Protecting me, getting hurt for me. He caught my wrist again, softer this time. Because every time I see your face, I remember that I can still save something. That night, I didn't leave his room. I didn't mean for it to happen. But when he touched me, it wasn't about power or danger. It was desperation. A man who'd spent his life taking control, finally losing it. A woman who'd spent her life holding it together, finally letting go. It wasn't perfect. It was real. When morning came, everything changed. He was distant again, back in his armor. It can't happen again, he said flatly. Because you regret it? Because it made you a target. Before I could reply, the intercom buzzed. One of the guards' voices came through, tense. Boss, he's here. Marco. Vincent's eyes turned cold. He stood, buttoning his shirt. Stay in this room, no matter what you hear. Vincent, promise me. I promise. He left without looking back. Through the window, I saw the cars pull up. Men stepped out, dark suits, weapons visible. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Vincent's stance, the way his hand hovered near his gun. Then one of the men raised his arm. A flash, a sound that cut the air apart. Emma screamed from the next room. I ran to her, pulled her close. The world outside erupted, and that was how Act 2 ended. With the sound of gunfire, the echo of a man's promise, and the sickening fear that the one person I'd come to trust might be dying for me. Time blurred after the shooting. Hours, maybe days. I remember flashes. The sound of sirens, the smell of blood. Emma's cry muffled against my chest. I remember the weight of Vincent's body when they carried him past us. His shirt soaked crimson, his face ghost pale but still, impossibly alive. They took him away. I wasn't told where. The house emptied overnight, guards gone, cars vanished, lights dark. The woman in the suit reappeared only once, her voice low and urgent. You need to disappear for a while, Miss Carter. He'd want that, and so I did. Emma and I moved into a small apartment on the edge of another city. No marble floors, no guards, no silence heavy enough to choke on. Just ordinary air, ordinary mornings. I got a job at a bakery, something simple. The first few weeks, I jumped every time a black car passed by the window. Eventually, the fear dulled into a kind of ache, a constant, quiet absence that lived beneath my skin. For months, there was nothing. No messages, no shadows following me, no sign of him. I told myself that was good, that we were free. But freedom felt wrong without him. It's strange, the things you miss. The way his voice could fill a room without needing to raise it. The weight of his gaze, steady, unshakable. The way I never realized I was holding my breath until he walked in and I could finally exhale. Some nights, when Emma was asleep, I'd sit on the balcony and whisper into the dark. "You said you'd protect us, Vincent. Was that another lie?" The wind never answered. Then, one morning, the bakery doorbell rang. I looked up and froze. The man standing there wasn't Vincent, but he wore the same black suit, the same measured calm. He handed me an envelope. "From Mr. Moretti." My pulse broke into pieces. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside was a single line, handwritten. "Some debts take time to repay. Don't stop living while you wait." No signature. But the handwriting, I knew it. He was alive. That one sentence rearranged everything inside me. I went home that night and cried quietly while Emma slept. Not out of sadness, but relief. It was the first time in months I let myself believe he might come back. And he did. It was a rainy... No. Not rainy. I remember daylight flooding through the windows like forgiveness. I was dusting flour off the counter when the door opened, and there he was. Thinner, pale, moving slower than before, but alive. Real. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. He looked at me the same way, like he wasn't sure I was real either. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I whispered. He smiled a little, that half smile that always seemed to hide something. "You kept your promise. You're still breathing." I should have been angry. I should have asked where he'd been, why he disappeared. But all I said was, "You're late." He laughed, soft, broken. I almost didn't make it. We sat at one of the small tables by the window. The air between us felt fragile, full of everything we hadn't said. His right arm was in a sling. I reached toward it before stopping myself. Does it hurt? Only when I move it. Or breathe, or think too much. He looked around the bakery. "You built a life here." "I tried." He nodded slowly. "Good, you deserve that." "So why are you here, Vincent?" He leaned back, eyes heavy. "Because the war's over. Marco's gone, and because there's something I need to say before I disappear again." My chest tightened. "Disappear? I've made too many enemies to stay in one place. You and Emma, you're safe now. But if I stay, that changes." I wanted to scream at him. Tell him that I didn't care about safety, that I just wanted the truth. But his eyes, God, his eyes were so tired. I saw the years of blood and loyalty and loss carved into the lines on his face. "What did you come to say?" I whispered. He took something from his pocket, an envelope sealed with wax. He slid it across the table. "What's this?" "Your name, on a deed. To the bakery. Paid in full. No more rent." I stared at him. "Why would you—" "Because you paid for my breakfast once," he said quietly, and I didn't know what to do with that kind of kindness. "Vincent, you don't owe me anything." His eyes softened. "You're wrong. You gave me something no one else did. You saw me when I wasn't supposed to be seen." He paused, searching my face. "And that night, when I told you protection comes with a price, I didn't mean yours. I meant mine." I felt the tears before I realized they were there. "Don't do this," I whispered. "Don't walk away again." He stood slowly, wincing as he straightened his arm. "If I stay, you'll never be free, and I can't live knowing I'm the reason you keep looking over your shoulder." He started to turn, but I grabbed his hand. "Then stay for one more minute." He froze. "1 minute," I said. "No lies, no rules, just us." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. The world shrank to that single moment. The hum of the refrigerator, the light on his face, the silence between heartbeats. "I thought I lost you," I said. "You did," he replied. "But somehow you still found me." "I don't know how to stop missing you." "Don't," he said. "Some people are meant to be missed." Then he leaned in, his forehead against mine. His voice was barely a breath. "If there's another life after this one, I'll find you sooner." When he kissed me, it wasn't fire anymore. It was gravity, slow, certain. A promise, not a possession. Then he was gone, just like that. No goodbye, no sound. Only the faint smell of cedar and smoke left behind. That was 2 years ago. I never saw him again. But sometimes, when I open the bakery early in the morning, I find fresh flowers on the counter. White lilies, tied with a black ribbon. No note, no name. Just silence that feels familiar. Emma's 10 now. She doesn't remember the danger, only that Mr. Vinny made the best hot chocolate she's ever had. I let her keep that version of him. The one who smiled. The one who saved us. As for me, I don't wait anymore. I live, I bake, I laugh. But some nights, when the world is still, I close my eyes and remember the man who taught me that survival isn't the absence of pain. It's choosing to love anyway. And if you're wondering whether I ever stopped thinking about him, no. You don't stop thinking about the person who saw you at your breaking point and didn't flinch. The one who turned danger into sanctuary, even for a moment. I think of that morning in the diner sometimes. The $23, the coffee, the stranger who forgot to pay. How something so small could set an entire lifetime in motion. Maybe that's what fate really is. Not destiny or luck. Just the quiet, ordinary choices that end up saving you. The last line he wrote to me, on the back of that deed, I didn't see it until months later. It was faint, almost hidden under the wax seal. It said, "If you ever need me, just pay someone's bill again. I'll find you." I smiled when I read it, because I knew he would. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever wondered what love looks like when it doesn't promise forever, it looks like that. It looks like a man who sends back 10 times the money and leaves with nothing but your name on his lips. It looks like a woman who survived, and that's what's left after the fire. Not the ashes, the warmth. If this story left you breathless, stay with me for more whispered confessions and untold loves that cut deep and heal slow. Follow, listen, and remember. Every story has a heartbeat if you dare to hear it.
The office of Mr. Blackwood was a temple of quiet importance, a place where the air itself felt expensive and still, smelling faintly of old leather and lemon polish. Sunlight, thick and golden as honey, streamed through the enormous windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in silent, endless waltzes. For Edward, this place was both a second home and a special kind of loneliness. At 19, he was too old to need watching and too young for his father to see as anything other than a background fixture in a life dominated by mergers, acquisitions, and international phone calls. His father, a great and busy man who built empires out of spreadsheets and handshakes, occupied the vast inner sanctuary, a room Edward often felt was farther away than any of the cities listed on his father's frantic travel schedule. But there was one spot in this quiet, polished world that radiated a different kind of warmth, a glow that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. This was the desk of Genevieve, his father's secretary. It was an island of gentle order in a sea of stern professionalism. A single healthy green plant curled towards the light on her desk, and the pen holder was a cheerful hand-painted mug, a stark contrast to the severe silver fixtures everywhere else. And then there was Genevieve herself. She was the quiet, beating heart of the entire operation, the calm center around which the storm of his father's business swirled. She was the one who remembered that Edward took his coffee with 2 sugars, not 1. She was the one who asked, with a sincerity he never doubted, how his philosophy exam had gone last week. Edward found himself inventing reasons to stop by the office. A forgotten textbook, a question about a bill, anything that would grant him a few moments in that sphere of quiet warmth. He would linger by her desk, making small talk, his world narrowing to the space between them. He watched the way she concentrated, the slight frown of her brow as she typed, the way she would tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear. He loved the sound of her laugh, a soft, melodic thing that seemed to make the very air in the room feel lighter. To Edward, these brief encounters were the brightest parts of his week, tiny oases of connection in a life that often felt arid and overlooked. On this particular day, the silence in the office felt heavier, more profound. Edward had come because his father, in a rare moment of recollection, had promised they would finally have dinner together, a proper meal, just the two of them. Edward had held on to that promise all week, a small shining coin of hope in his pocket. He waited, watching the long hand on the elegant clock on the wall sweep its endless circle. The door to the inner office finally opened, and his father emerged, not with a coat for dinner, but with his briefcase and travel bag. "Edward. Good you're here," his father said, barely pausing as he strode towards the elevator. "The Frankfurt trip was moved up. There's a crisis with the partners. I have to catch the 7 o'clock flight. We'll reschedule dinner." The words were not unkind, just efficient, like a surgeon's scalpel. They were delivered over his father's shoulder, already moving on to the next critical item on the agenda. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, sighing sound, swallowed his father whole, and then closed, leaving Edward standing alone in the vast, silent office. The promise of dinner evaporated, leaving behind only the hollow echo of his own disappointment. He felt like a ghost in his own life, visible only to the furniture. He didn't leave. He walked to the large window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass, looking down at the tiny cars and people moving like ants so far below. Everyone had somewhere to be, someone who noticed they were there. The sound of gentle typing, which had paused during his father's departure, started up again behind him. It was the only sound, a steady, patient rhythm. He had forgotten she was still here. The typing stopped. He heard the soft push of a chair and the quiet whisper of her footsteps on the plush carpet. He didn't turn around, too wrapped up in his own hurt. He sensed her presence beside him, a quiet warmth near his shoulder. She didn't speak for a long moment, simply standing with him in the shared silence, looking out at the city beginning to sparkle with evening lights. "He doesn't mean it, you know," Genevieve said, her voice soft but clear in the quiet room. "The forgetting. His mind is just a very crowded room. It's hard for anything to find a chair." Edward let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was the first time anyone had ever acknowledged his father's absence without making excuses for it. She wasn't telling him it was okay, she was just telling him she saw it too. That simple acknowledgement was a balm on a wound he was so used to hiding. He finally turned to look at her. The setting sun cast a golden halo around her, lighting the edges of her hair. Her eyes, usually so professional and composed, were filled with a genuine, gentle concern that was meant only for him. In that moment, something inside him, a dam he didn't even know he had built, broke open. The words came out not as a planned confession, but as a quiet, desperate truth he could no longer keep contained. "He only sees the things on his calendar," Edward whispered, his voice rough with emotion. His eyes held hers, refusing to look away. "The meetings, the flights, the numbers. But you. I could spend all day between your smiles, Genevieve. They're the only thing I come here for. They're the best part of my whole week." The air in the room seemed to vanish. The hum of the computer servers faded into nothing. He had said it. He had laid his fragile, hopeful heart right there on the expensive carpet between them. He watched her face, expecting shock, maybe anger, certainly a gentle but firm rejection. Her lips parted slightly and a soft, startled breath escaped them. A faint blush colored her cheeks, a delicate pink that was more telling than any words. Her professional mask, usually so perfectly in place, had slipped, and for a breathtaking second, Edward saw pure, unguarded surprise and something else, a flicker of that same warm happiness he felt whenever he was near her. Her gaze dropped from his eyes to his lips for a fleeting, electric moment before finding his eyes again. She didn't move away. She didn't scold him. Instead, she hugged her tablet a little closer to her chest as if it were a shield, and offered him a small, tremulous smile that was entirely new, one he had never seen before. It was a smile just for this moment, just for him. "Edward," she said, his name a soft sigh on her lips. "That is the sweetest secret anyone has ever trusted me with." She paused, her eyes serious yet incredibly soft. "But it is a secret, you understand? We have to be very, very careful with it." And with those words she didn't close a door. She merely cracked it open, letting a sliver of dazzling, impossible light spill into the dim room. The spark of hope in Edward's chest, which had been nothing but a dying ember moments before, burst into a quiet, steady flame. The world had shifted, and nothing, not even the polished silence of his father's office, would ever feel the same again. The days that followed Edward's confession unfolded within a strange and breathless new reality, a dual existence where the public world of his father's office remained frozen in its usual polite formality, while a second, secret life thrummed with a vibrant, hidden energy just beneath the surface. The polished desk, the humming computers, the distant echo of his father's voice on speakerphone, all of it became a stage upon which they performed their parts with careful precision. Edward was the son making brief, casual visits. Genevieve was the secretary, efficient and pleasantly detached. Their eyes would meet for a fraction of a second longer than was necessary, a silent message passing between them in the space of a single heartbeat before glancing away, the ghost of a shared secret playing on their lips. This new, fragile connection first found its true voice not in the open, but in the digital shadows of their phones. It began with a single, cautious text from Edward late one evening, a message that contained no declaration, only a simple question about a book he had seen on her desk. Her reply was not immediate, and in that agonizing wait, Edward felt the fate of his entire world hanging in the balance. Then, the soft chime of his phone, her name glowing on the screen, and a thoughtful paragraph-long answer that opened a door. From there, a river of words began to flow between them, a constant, quiet stream that ran parallel to their daylight lives. They exchanged thoughts on music, the melancholy sound of a late-night piano piece he loved, the vibrant energy of a folk band she discovered. They debated the endings of novels, shared small frustrations and tiny triumphs from their days, building a mosaic of each other's inner lives, piece by precious piece. The idea of a meeting was a risk that hung over them, a necessary and terrifying next step. It was Genevieve, with a quiet courage that surprised even herself, who finally suggested it, naming a park on the other side of the city, a place of winding paths and secluded benches where the crowds of the downtown core were a distant rumor. The morning of their meeting, Edward dressed with a nervous attention to detail he had never known, his stomach a tight knot of anticipation and fear. The journey across town felt endless, the city transforming from a familiar landscape into an unknown territory he was crossing to reach her. He saw her first from a distance, a solitary figure sitting on a green bench under the generous shade of an old oak tree, its leaves just beginning to blush with the first hints of autumn. She was not looking at her phone, but simply watching the ducks glide across the pond, her posture less rigid, more at ease than he had ever seen it in the office. As he approached, his footsteps quiet on the soft grass, she turned and her face broke into a smile that was entirely unreserved, a sunrise meant only for him. It was in that moment, seeing her in this new context, free from the constraints of their professional roles, that Edward truly understood the depth of what he felt. This was not a crush, it was the beginning of something profound. They walked for what felt like miles, their conversation now freed from the confines of a small screen, tumbling out in eager, laughing waves. He told her about his dreams of studying architecture, not business, of designing spaces where people could feel at home, a direct rebellion against the cold glass towers his father built. She spoke of her own family, of a childhood filled with noise and love, and her quiet ambition to one day run her own small event planning company, a dream she kept tucked away like a cherished heirloom. They shared stories they had never told anyone else, their vulnerabilities offered not as weaknesses, but as gifts of trust. Edward had brought a simple blanket in his backpack, and as the afternoon sun began to mellow, casting long, deep shadows, he spread it out on a soft patch of grass overlooking the water. This simple act, the domesticity of laying out a blanket for them to share, felt more intimate than any words they had exchanged. They sat, their shoulders almost touching, the air between them charged with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fading sun. The world around them seemed to hold its breath. The gentle lapping of the water against the shore was the only sound as Edward, his heart hammering against his ribs, slowly reached out and covered her hand with his. Her breath caught, a soft, audible intake of air. For a terrifying second, her fingers lay still beneath his. Then they shifted, turning until her palm met his, her fingers lacing between his with a gentle certainty that sent a jolt straight to his soul. He looked at their joined hands, then up into her eyes, which were wide and dark and filled with a tenderness that made his throat feel tight. "Being here with you," he said, his voice low and a little unsteady, "it doesn't feel like an escape. It feels like this is the real world and everything else was just waiting." Genevieve did not answer with words. Instead, she lifted her other hand and gently brushed a stray leaf from the shoulder of his jacket, her touch lingering there for a moment. It was a simple gesture, but it held a world of permission. Edward leaned in slowly, giving her every possible moment to turn away, to retreat back into the safety of what was proper. But she didn't move. Her eyes fluttered closed as he closed the final, breathless inch between them. Their first kiss was not a collision but a discovery. It was soft and tentative, a quiet question and a sure answer all at once. It tasted of the fresh autumn air and the lingering sweetness of the apple they had shared. It was a kiss that held all the unspoken words, all the stolen glances, all the hopeful, terrifying beauty of their secret. It was a spark that ignited a gentle fire in their veins, a warm, spreading feeling that was both calming and exhilarating. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. They stayed like that for a long time, silent, knowing that the map of their world had been redrawn forever, with this park, this bench, this kiss as its new and beating heart. The world they built in the weeks that followed was a delicate, beautiful secret, a fortress of stolen moments that stood in defiant contrast to the rigid architecture of their public lives. The park became their sanctuary, a place where Edward was not a CEO's son and Genevieve was not a secretary, but simply two people discovering the universe contained within each other's souls. They explored quiet art galleries, their fingers secretly linked in the dim light between exhibits. They spent rainy afternoons in the back corners of old bookstores, speaking in hushed tones about everything and nothing. Their connection, once a fragile thread of text messages, had woven itself into a strong, unbreakable tapestry of shared experience and deepening intimacy. The memory of their first kiss was a constant, warm presence, a touchstone they returned to again and again, each new kiss building upon the last, each moment of closeness feeling more natural, more destined than the one before. The end of their secret world did not arrive with a whisper, but with the sudden, cold slam of a door. Mr. Blackwood returned from his international trip a day early, a shift in the corporate winds altering his schedule. He arrived at the office unannounced, his mind already churning with the momentum of a dozen new deals. It was in that moment, as he strode past Genevieve's desk, that he saw it. Edward was there, dropping off a folder, a flimsy, prearranged excuse. But as his father passed, Edward's hand, of its own volition, reached out and brushed a stray thread from Genevieve's sleeve. It was not a lover's touch, but it was a touch of profound familiarity, of unguarded tenderness, a gesture that spoke of a private world his father was not part of. Mr. Blackwood stopped dead. His eyes, usually scanning for profit margins and logistical errors, now focused with terrifying clarity on the space between his son and his employee. He saw the way Edward's body was angled towards her, a shield and an offering. He saw the faint, unconscious smile that Genevieve had not yet schooled from her features. The pieces clicked into place with the brutal efficiency of a business takeover. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, charged with a silent, gathering storm. He did not say a word to Edward. Instead, he turned his icy gaze to Genevieve, his voice low and cutting. "My office. Now." The confrontation was swift and merciless. Behind the closed door of the powerful inner sanctum, he did not yell. His anger was far more dangerous, delivered in a quiet, disdainful tone that stripped away all dignity. He spoke of professionalism, of betrayal of trust, of a grievous error in judgment. He called it a cliché, the predictable folly of a young man and a woman who should have known better. When Genevieve emerged 10 minutes later, her face was pale but composed, her eyes bright with unshed tears of fury and shame. She was, as of that moment, terminated. Edward learned the news not from her, but from the echoing silence of her empty desk when he returned later that afternoon, his heart full of plans for their next meeting. The sight of her clean, vacant workspace sent a jolt of pure panic through him. His father found him there, staring at the empty chair, and delivered the verdict with a cold, final satisfaction, believing the matter was now closed, the disruption neatly excised from his orderly world. But the calm obedience his father expected did not come. Instead, a lifetime of quiet resentment, of missed dinners and broken promises, of feeling like a footnote in his father's biography, rose up in Edward with a ferocity that surprised them both. "You," Edward said, his voice trembling not with fear but with a long-suppressed power, "just fired the only person in this entire building who ever truly saw me. Whoever looked at me and didn't just see your shadow." He took a step towards his father, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "If your world doesn't have a place for her, then it has no place for me either." He did not wait for a reply. He turned and walked out of the office, leaving his father in stunned silence, the echo of the heavy door closing behind him sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. He found Genevieve at her small apartment, her belongings from the office in a cardboard box by the door. She looked up at him, her expression a heartbreaking mix of devastation and relief. He did not offer empty comfort. He did not apologize for his father. He simply went to her, took her hands in his and looked into her eyes, his own gaze steady and sure. "I don't want his money," Edward said, his voice low and intense. "I don't want his name if it means I can't have you." It's not a choice for me, Genevieve. It's the only thing that makes sense. Choose a life with me. It might be simpler, it might be harder, but I promise you it will be ours. Genevieve looked at the young man before her, no longer a boy with a crush, but a man making the most definitive stand of his life. For her. She saw the unwavering conviction in his eyes and felt the last of her fears dissolve, replaced by a profound, unshakable certainty. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but she was smiling. "A life with you, Edward," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "is the only job I've ever wanted." 1 year later, the scene was entirely different. They were in their own small, sunlit apartment, a world away from the cold opulence of his father's office. Their books, were stacked on shelves they had built together. Photographs of their adventures, a weekend at the coast, a hike in the mountains, a silly selfie in a grocery store, covered the walls. The air smelled of coffee and the simple dinner they had just shared. Edward was deep in his architecture studies, a set of blueprints spread across their kitchen table. Genevieve was working for a small, thriving boutique, her natural talent for organization and her warm professionalism having quickly made her indispensable. She was already planning her first independent event. They were talking, their conversation an easy, flowing river of shared jokes, dreams, and quiet plans for a future that stretched out before them, bright and full of promise. They had built their own foundation, not on wealth or expectation, but on the simple, unshakable truth of the love that had begun with a secret whisper in a quiet office. They had chosen each other, and in that choice they had found their forever. If you were moved by Edward and Genevieve's journey from a secret whisper to a forever love, if you found yourself rooting for their happiness against all odds, then you won't want to miss the next story. Subscribe to the channel for more sweeping, heartfelt romances about forbidden connections, the courage to choose love, and the moments that change everything. A new world of unforgettable characters and their epic love stories is just one click away.
I used to count the cracks on the car ceiling to keep from crying. There were 9 of them. The biggest one ran above the passenger seat, curving like a lightning scar. My daughter, Lily, thought it looked like a dragon's tail. She was 5. She had a way of making ruins sound like magic. That night, the air was freezing, the kind that burned your lungs when you breathed. The car windows were fogged, and I could see our reflections faintly. 2 ghosts caught in a metal box parked behind a convenience store. The world outside smelled like rain, though it hadn't fallen in weeks. I remember tucking my jacket tighter around Lily, pretending the thin fabric could shield her from the cold. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice a small flutter in the dark. "Is Daddy gonna find us?" I froze. My heart thudded against my ribs like it wanted out. "No, baby. He doesn't know where we are. We're safe now." Safe. The word sounded ridiculous. We were sleeping in a 2006 Corolla with half a tank of gas and a trunk full of the only things we hadn't sold. 2 suitcases, a box of toys, and a bag of groceries that wouldn't last another 2 days. When she fell asleep, I just sat there, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, staring at the empty road. The silence was heavy, like it was waiting for me to break. I didn't, not yet, but I could feel it coming. I used to think love was supposed to save you. Turns out it can also drown you. The man I married had a smile that made me ignore every warning. By the time I realized who he really was, it was too late. He wasn't just cruel, he was connected. I don't mean socially, I mean criminally. The kind of connected that made people disappear. When I finally ran, I didn't pack jewelry or photos. I packed my daughter, my ID, and a bottle of Advil. I didn't even take shoes that matched. That was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks of gas station bathrooms, whispered bedtimes, and pretending I wasn't terrified every time a black car drove past. That night was worse than the others. The temperature dropped below freezing, and the heater had given up hours ago. I rubbed my hands together, trying to bring warmth back, when I saw headlights in the rearview mirror. My pulse stuttered. The car slowed behind us. A black SUV, no sound, no honk, just stillness. I reached over and touched Lily's shoulder. "Sweetheart, wake up." She stirred, confused. "Mommy?" "Shh, it's okay." I grabbed my purse, reaching for the tiny can of pepper spray inside. My ex had people, men who did favors for him. I'd seen what they could do. The SUV door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad shoulders, the kind of stillness that didn't come from peace, but control. He wasn't rushing, and that terrified me more. He walked straight toward the car window, his face shadowed, hands in his coat pockets. I cracked the window an inch. "We're fine," I said before he could speak. My voice shook. "Just leave us alone." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. Then his voice, low, calm, dangerous in the quiet way that made you listen. "You've been parked here for 3 nights. My men thought you were watching the place." "What place?" I glanced around, but my mind was spinning. His men? He leaned closer, and for a second the streetlight caught his face. Dark hair, sharp jawline, black dress shirt with the top buttons undone. He looked expensive and lethal, the kind of man you prayed not to owe anything to. I swallowed hard. "We're not watching anyone. My voice cracked. "We have nowhere else to go." His eyes shifted. Not soft, but curious. Then he looked past me, to the back seat. "Your daughter," he said quietly. "She's freezing." I felt my throat tighten. "Don't touch her." He raised his hand slightly. "Relax, I'm not going to hurt you." His tone wasn't gentle. It was factual, like he didn't need to prove it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring. He held it up. "There's an apartment 2 blocks from here, empty. Take it for the night." I blinked. "What? Why would you—" "Because you look like hell," he interrupted, his voice steady. "And your kid deserves heat." I should have said no. I knew better. But Lily stirred again in the back seat, whispering my name, teeth chattering. The decision made itself. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold sliced through my clothes. He watched me closely but didn't move closer. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled slightly, like he wasn't used to being questioned. "Nico," that was all he said. Just Nico. Like that was supposed to mean something. Maybe it did. He handed me the keys. His fingers brushed mine, barely a touch, but enough to make my skin jolt like static. I hated that I felt it. "If you're lying," I said, gripping the keys, He cut me off. "You'll what?" His tone had the faintest hint of amusement. "You're shaking, sweetheart. You can't even stand straight." He was right. I was trembling all over, from cold and fear and anger. "I don't trust you," he nodded once. "Good. Don't." Then he turned, walked back to his SUV, and disappeared into the night. I stood there for a long time, clutching those keys like they were a trap. Maybe they were, but I couldn't ignore Lily's small, fragile voice behind me. "Mommy, I'm cold." The apartment was 2 blocks away, just like he said. The building looked old but clean, with flickering hallway lights and a heavy wooden door that stuck when I turned the key. Inside there was heat, real, steady warmth that made my chest ache. Lily ran to the couch and curled up instantly. I found blankets in the closet, a loaf of bread on the counter, and bottled water in the fridge. Whoever Nico was, he hadn't been lying about the apartment being ready. Too ready. I sat on the edge of the couch and watched Lily sleep. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't shivering. I should have been grateful. Instead, I felt the weight of another trap closing in. I whispered to myself, what did I just do? Somewhere in the distance, I heard a car engine start. I looked out the window. A black SUV sat parked across the street, headlights off. Watching. I told myself it didn't matter. He'd done his part. We were safe, but deep down, I knew what I'd really done. Traded one danger for another. When I finally closed my eyes, exhaustion pulled me under fast. But before sleep took me, I thought about the way he said my name without even asking for it, like he already knew it somehow. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of someone knocking on the door. Not a frantic knock, slow, deliberate. Lily was still asleep. I moved quietly, heart pounding, and peeked through the peephole. It was him. Standing there in the same black shirt, sleeves rolled up, one hand in his pocket, the other holding 2 paper cups of coffee. When I didn't open the door, he said, "You didn't lock the window. Anyone could have walked in." His voice was calm, almost teasing. "We need to talk." I hesitated, every instinct screaming run. But something in me, something reckless, tired, and stupidly curious, reached for the lock. As the door clicked open, he looked at me, really looked, and said quietly, "You're in my territory now, sweetheart. You should have known that before you parked on my street." My pulse jumped. "Your territory?" His gaze didn't waver. "You and your daughter are safe here," he said. "But safety has a price." That's when I realized I hadn't escaped anything. I'd just stepped straight into the lion's den, warmth, coffee, and all. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. You ever feel like the floor beneath you is made of glass? It looks solid, it even sounds solid until one wrong step and everything shatters. That's what living with Nico felt like. Every breath was borrowed. Every comfort suspicious. He didn't force me to stay. That was the part that scared me most. He just made it easy. Heat, food, a door that locked from the inside. Safety was a luxury I hadn't felt in months, and he knew exactly how much it would cost me to accept it. The first night after he brought coffee, he stayed. Sat across from me at the kitchen table, silent, watching me like I was a book he couldn't decide whether to close or burn. Lily slept on the couch again, tangled in a pile of blankets. I asked, "What do you want?" He didn't answer right away. He just leaned back, arms folded, black shirt unbuttoned enough to show the faint edge of a scar near his collarbone. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "You parked outside my warehouse for 3 nights. That attracts attention. People talk." "I wasn't watching you," I said. "I didn't even know who you were." He tilted his head. "And now you do?" "No," I admitted. "Good, that was it." Conversation over. He stood, walked to the door, and paused. "There's food in the fridge. The heat's on a timer. Don't mess with it. I'll have someone bring clothes for the kid tomorrow." When the door clicked shut, I exhaled for the first time in an hour. Relief felt temporary, like oxygen on loan. Lily woke early the next morning, grinning. "Mommy, there's cereal," she squealed, holding up a box like it was treasure. I smiled, weakly. She didn't understand the kind of generosity that came with strings attached. I did. Around noon, a woman showed up at the door, tall, dressed in all black, sunglasses indoors. She didn't say her name, just dropped off 2 paper bags. Clothes, shoes, even a small stuffed bear for Lily. No note. No explanation. That evening, Nico came back. He didn't knock this time. He just appeared in the doorway, holding takeout. "Dinner," he said simply. I stood there, frozen. "You don't have to..." He cut me off. "You think I'm the kind of man who brings dinner for fun?" I didn't know what to say to that. He set the bags down, looked around the apartment like he was inspecting a perimeter. Then his gaze landed on Lily, who was coloring on the floor. "You like pancakes?" he asked her. She nodded shyly. "Mommy makes the best ones." "She does, huh?" His mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen on him. I hated how human that moment looked. This man who probably had blood on his hands kneeling on my floor, pretending to care about crayons and syrup. When Lily went to bed, I finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Because I owe someone." "Who?" He looked away. "Someone who once saved me from becoming the worst version of myself. I pay it forward when I can. And I'm supposed to believe that?" He shrugged. "You can believe whatever helps you sleep." There was something in his tone, something that almost sounded like guilt. But before I could ask more, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, jaw tightening. "I have to go," he said. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." He left before I could reply. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The city outside hummed with noise, but the apartment felt too quiet. I paced the floor, staring at the door like it might vanish. Then I saw it. Something small, metallic under the rug by the entrance. A tracking device. My stomach dropped. I didn't even think. I grabbed it and shoved it down the garbage disposal. 10 minutes later, there was a knock. Hard, urgent. I froze. When I opened it, Nico stood there, furious. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his hair tousled like he'd run a hand through it 100 times. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I found a tracker," I said. "I destroyed it." He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "You don't get it. That was for your safety." "Safety?" "You were tracking me!" He stepped closer, his voice rising. "There are people looking for you. Dangerous people. If they find you before I do, you're dead. Do you understand that?" My hands shook. "You're one of them, aren't you?" He went still. "Not anymore." That pause, too long, too heavy, told me everything I needed to know. He lowered his voice. "Your husband owes money to men who don't forgive debts. When he couldn't pay, he offered something else. I stared at him, numb. What do you mean, something else? He looked at me like the truth was poison. You. For a moment, the room tilted. I couldn't breathe. You're lying. I wish I was. His tone softened, almost painfully. He sold you to them, but you ran before the deal closed. That's why they want you alive, and that's why I can't let them find you. I pressed a hand to my mouth, shaking my head. You expect me to trust you after saying that? No, he said simply, but you don't have a choice. He turned and walked out before I could answer. The next day, he didn't show. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I'd take Lily and run again. But when I opened the window that morning, there was a black SUV parked across the street. Not his, different plates. I packed our things fast. Lily clutched her bear, confused. Mommy, where are we going? Somewhere safe, I whispered, though the words tasted like lies. We made it halfway down the stairwell before the door below creaked open. Footsteps. Heavy ones. I froze. A voice echoed up the stairs. Mrs. Grant? My husband's name, not mine anymore. Lily gasped, her small fingers tightening around mine. Go back up, I whispered. We ran, breathless, heartbeat slamming against the walls. I barely made it inside the apartment before the sound of boots thundered up the stairs. I shoved the couch against the door, grabbed the kitchen knife and pulled Lily behind me. Then, silence. The doorknob twisted once, twice, then stopped. My heart pounded. I was about to call 911 when another sound cut through the air. Gunfire. 2 shots, shouts, a thud, then nothing. 5 seconds later, a key turned in the lock. The door opened, and Nico stepped in, chest heaving, blood on his sleeve. He looked at me, then at Lily, then at the door. You really need to stop running, he said quietly. I dropped the knife, shaking. What did you do? He shut the door behind him. I kept you alive. He walked past me, sat on the couch like it was just another Tuesday, and pressed a cloth to his arm. Lily peeked out from behind me, eyes wide. You're hurt, Nico smiled faintly. Just a scratch. He wasn't lying. But there was something broken in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. That night, after I got Lily back to sleep, I found him on the balcony staring out at the city. His shirt was off, and I saw the scar along his ribs, a long, ugly line that looked old. Why do you care what happens to us? I asked. He didn't turn around. Because I used to be the kind of man who hurt people like you. I moved closer, my voice barely a whisper. And now? Now I'm trying not to be. The silence stretched. The night air was cold, but standing next to him felt warm in a way that scared me. When he finally looked at me, his eyes softened. You should sleep. I can't, I said. He reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear, barely touching me, but enough to make my breath catch. Then just breathe, he murmured. For the first time in months, I did. That was the moment everything changed. The fear didn't disappear, but it shifted, turned into something quieter, heavier. Like gravity. By the time I woke the next morning, he was gone again. But there was a note on the table. Don't open the door for anyone but me. We're not safe yet. And I meant what I said. You're not just someone I'm protecting. Below it, his signature, one word, Nico. I stared at it until the letters blurred. The glass beneath my feet was cracking again. I could feel it. I just didn't know which fall would come first. The one that killed me, or the one that made me stay. I used to think survival meant running, keeping your head down, staying quiet, never letting anyone close enough to hurt you. Turns out survival's a lot quieter than that. It's waking up one morning and realizing the world didn't end, even though it tried. It's been 3 months since the night Nico disappeared. 3 months since the gunfire. Since the apartment filled with smoke and fear and his voice shouting my name before the world went black. I woke up in a hospital bed with stitches in my arm, a bruised rib, and no sign of him. The nurse told me he'd carried me in, bleeding himself, refused treatment until I was stable. Then he vanished before the cops arrived. Typical. I tried to move on. Not because I wanted to, but because Lily needed me to. We're in a small town now, 2 hours from the city, tucked behind a diner and a laundromat that smells like detergent and burnt coffee. The kind of place nobody asks questions. I got a job at the diner. Lily started kindergarten. We have a 1-bedroom apartment that leaks when it rains, but it's ours. Every night, I check the locks 3 times before bed. I still flinch when headlights pass by the window. And sometimes, when I'm closing the diner alone, I catch myself looking toward the door, half expecting him to walk through it. Dark hair, calm eyes, black shirt with the top button undone. Like nothing ever happened. But he doesn't. The cops came once, asking questions about my husband's business dealings. I told them I didn't know anything, and that was true enough. He's gone, too. They found his car in a river outside the city. No body. Just silence. Maybe it's wrong, but I didn't cry. One night, after closing, I walked home with the sound of crickets and highway noise behind me. The stars were out, tiny, faint, but enough. Lily was asleep when I got home, sprawled across the couch with her stuffed bear. I tucked her in, then sat by the window, watching the world stay still. That's when I saw the reflection behind me. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just whispered, "You're late." Nico stepped out of the shadows, leaner than before, eyes tired but alive. There was a scar near his jaw that hadn't been there before. He looked like he'd been gone for years, not months. He said quietly, "You moved." "I had to," I replied. Hospitals ask questions. He nodded like he expected that. Then he looked around the small apartment. At the peeling wallpaper, the tiny kitchen, the pile of Lily's crayons on the table. His expression softened for a second. "She's okay? She's perfect." He let out a slow breath and leaned against the wall. "Good." I crossed my arms, trying to steady myself. "Where did you go?" He didn't answer right away, just rubbed the back of his neck and said, "I cleaned up the mess." I knew what that meant. "And now?" He looked at me then, really looked. "Now I'm done with it." All of it. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But men like him didn't just walk away. "You can't just erase that life," I said. He smirked faintly. "I can try." Silence filled the room again. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the soft whistle of wind through the window frame. It felt fragile, like the world was holding its breath. Finally, I said, "You should go. If they find you here," he stepped closer. "They won't." Something about the way he said it made my chest ache. I hated that his calm still did that to me, that it still made me feel safe when it shouldn't. He asked, "Do you still look over your shoulder?" "Every day." "Then I didn't fail you." I laughed bitterly. "You call this not failing?" He moved closer, his voice quieter now. "You're alive. Your daughter's alive. That's all I ever wanted." My throat tightened. "You don't get to take credit for that." He nodded once. "Fair enough." I turned away before he could see my eyes. I didn't want him to see how much I still cared. How much of my strength came from pretending I didn't. "Behind me," he said softly. "You don't have to forgive me. But I had to see you one last time. Something in me cracked." "Why?" "Because the night I carried you into that hospital," he said. "I realized I'd spent my whole life protecting the wrong things. Money, power, reputation, but the only thing that ever mattered was standing right in front of me, begging me not to hurt her." He took a slow step closer. I could feel his warmth behind me. "And I did anyway." My voice broke. "You didn't. I almost did," he said. "If I hadn't walked away when I did, you'd be buried next to your husband." I turned to face him. "Then why come back?" He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Because I'm selfish." I studied him, every scar, every shadow under his eyes. He looked haunted, human, tired of fighting ghosts. I whispered, "I don't need saving anymore." "I know," he said. "That's why I can finally leave." He started for the door, and panic clawed at me before I could stop it. "Where will you go?" He looked over his shoulder. "Someplace quiet, maybe somewhere that doesn't know my name." I wanted to ask him to stay. I didn't. I just stood there, silent, while he stepped out into the night. The door shut softly behind him, and the world didn't collapse. It just kept breathing. Weeks passed. The ache dulled. Lily started drawing pictures of our new life, as she called it. Flowers, sun, 2 stick figures holding hands. I didn't ask who the second one was. Then one morning, when I went to open the diner, I found an envelope taped to the door. My name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a key, no note, no return address, just a small brass key and a folded sheet of paper that said, "For when you stop running." Below it was a drawing, crayon lines, a sun, a house, a little girl. Lily's handwriting. My breath caught. I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. I just tucked the key into my pocket and went back to flipping pancakes for strangers. Sometimes I think about him. The way his silence could fill a room, the way his calm could steady a storm. He wasn't my fairy tale. He wasn't even my rescue. He was the fire that burned everything false away, so I could finally see what was left. And what was left was us. Lily and me, a cracked window. A cheap apartment, a life we built with our own hands. When people at the diner ask about my past, I tell them I got lost once. That's it. I don't talk about the car nights, or the men with guns, or the man with the black shirt who taught me what it means to be seen and still survive. But every now and then, when the night's quiet and Lily's asleep, I'll take out that key, hold it, feel the weight of everything it means. Freedom, forgiveness, a promise that didn't need words. The funny thing about glass, when it breaks, it cuts deep. But if you're lucky, it catches the light in ways it never did before. That's what he left me with. Not perfection, not a happy ending, just truth. I stopped counting cracks. Now I watch the light. If her story held you still for even a heartbeat, if you felt her fear, her fight, her fragile kind of love, then don't leave yet. There are more confessions like this, more voices that survived the fire. Subscribe, stay, and listen to the next secret she was never meant to tell.